recognition of where the opportunities are intellectually, what the competition is doing, and then where are our strengths and our advantages. Now, if you think we don't have any strengths or we don't have any advantages, then all is lost. Because no amount of money can fix that. Howard, you do not know how strong this institution is until you begin taking a very close look at campuses across this country. You know, in my time of doing my work, I've seen 300 or 400 campuses and talked to faculty, and we have people here who are treasures. Now, I understand Moorland-Spingarn is a treasure, but we've got walking treasures, some of whom don't know they are treasures. You know, segregation did work. I hope you understand that. When I was a student, the faculty that we now talk about, the great so-and-so, they did not know they were great. They had been isolated, shoved to the side, and a number of things happened up here. Now, without making this too long, I'm going to say something because most of you don't know me. When I was vice president, I insisted on having an interview with every prospective faculty member. And most of my faculty colleagues thought I was nuts to do that, but it was very important. Now, there was a little dialogue that would take place that ran something like this. Now, Professor so-and-so, do you think that there's such a thing as racism in the United States? Oh, of course, Dr. Winston, of course, of course. Do you think it's bad? Oh, of course, of course, of course. By this time, the prospective professor is looking at me like this man is a little touched. I said, do you think it does bad things to people? Oh, yes, oh, yeah. So well, you're about to work in a place where the overwhelming majority of people have had their personal encounters with that system. And the fact that they have a PhD and they have this and that does not mean that they have escaped unscathed. Now that is a reality that we work with and we live with because this is who we are. But you cannot, on the one hand, talk about racism and how terrible it is, and then think it has no effect on us at all, because it has on all of us. And so, in our focus on the future, looking at this new day, and I do not think we're going to be in any post-racial society. The idiom will change, but it is different. It's a world of difference. And some of us are not really ready for it. And yet, we have been involved with this university that was ready for it long before the rest of the country was ready for it. Because if there's one thing about this university, it is that after you've been here a little while, you do not have very many superstitions left about people. You know, you just don't. And that you don't have them about black people, you don't have them about white people. One little other story, and then I'll finish this. One day in my office, one of the very important people on this campus came into my office. Mr. Vice President, Mr. Vice President, he's very nervous, you've got a real problem on your hands. I said, you know, I've got problems like a dog has fleas. Which one did you have in mind? He said, well, you know, you're just going to have to face it. You're going to have to face it. You're going to have to look for the first white chairman of the chemistry department. I looked at him. I said, Joe, what are you talking about? He said, well, you know, the world has changed and so on. I said, the first white chairman of the chemistry department? I said, what about J. Leon Shereshevsky, who was head of the department from 1934 to the 1950s? He said, oh, Sherry wasn't white. He was Howard. Now, what was that illustrating? That was illustrating that this facial racial thing that we have got going in the United States had been, in that instance, because this professor had been Professor Shereshevsky's student in physical chemistry. And everybody in that department adored him, and he was Howard. He was not white. But now, what did Professor Shereshevsky understand about Howard? A Russian Jew who had to leave Russia in one of its last pogroms, had been a chemistry professor at Lehigh University, and was run out of Lehigh in a wave of anti-Semitism. His colleague Max Meanies was run out of Lehigh at the same time, and both of them were told, you know, a place where you might really find a good career is at Howard University. And Max Meanies came here and became chairman of the psychology department, and people didn't think he was white either. He was Howard. And when Professor Shereshevsky was involved in the Manhattan Project, because it was known, this was serious stuff, that Howard had the best chemistry department in Washington, he insisted that his black colleagues be included in the Manhattan Project too. That was Howard. Now, my concern is that we have gotten to use shorthand about what this place is in such a way that our very rich tradition of treating people as people and developing people as people got pushed around after taboo. Now, I understand why taboo happened, why it needed to happen. And we were a better institution after it happened in many ways. But you know, you're not supposed to be in the same baptismal mode forever. And I think we have, in some ways, gotten stuck there. Now, we've done a lot of talking about the next point, now move on. Another aspect of the current situation is the center's posture in the digital age. Which resources should be online? The Folger Shakespeare Library here in Washington has a growing part of its collection online, including manuscripts. Digitization of all the first folios of Shakespeare is currently underway. Similar projects are at the Beininke Library at Yale and the Houghton Library at Harvard. I know that funds are available for digitization. The question for us is an intellectual one, and a strategic one in terms of enhancing the center's resource base. In the 1970s, the Moorland-Spingarn Research Center had the best photo duplication and photography facilities in the city, bar none, and an accomplished staff. What should be done about rebuilding those resources? They were lost in the various budget cuts. A sense of modesty must not interfere with stating that the center in the 1970s had not only a large library and curatorial staff, but one of the best of any of the research libraries in this city, including Folger and the Library of Congress. Fortunately, a few of those staff members remain, but in the more than 30 years that have passed, most of the staff has now retired or is located around the country in fine libraries and research centers. It was my intention that the Moorland-Spingarn Research Center would be an incubator of careers, but we have not had the replacements that administrative prudence would have required. I should conclude these propositions with a word about the changed circumstances of the fields served by the center. Once upon a time, Howard had the leading place on practically all fronts, with a few notable exceptions. The fact that the world of scholarship, including its richest and most prestigious institutions, now recognizes the fundamental importance of those fields has changed the competitive landscape for acquisitions of all kinds including scarce staff. We must not be afflicted by nostalgia for the old days, not all of which were so good anyway, nor harbor resentment that other institutions have developed formidable faculty capacity and rapidly growing collections and other resources in support of Black studies. We are in a competitive environment precisely because the labors of Dr. William Edward Burghardt Du Bois, Dr. Carter Godwin Woodson, Professor Alain Leroy Locke, Professor Charles Harris Wesley, Professor Rayford Whittingham Logan, Professors E. Franklin Frazier, Sterling A. Brown, Arthur P. Davis, James A. Porter, and others have borne fruit. Shame on us if we cannot focus our intellects on the issues that confront us, correct our institutions